Hi there, good morning and welcome to Warsaw here in Poland, home of CD Projekt Red, the team behind The Witcher, a gaming franchise based around the short stories and novels of Mr. Andrzej Sapkowski, and now one of the most anticipated games of 2015. If you like video games, you've heard of The Witcher, but it's a series that's intimidated a lot of the gaming audience. Since it first appeared in 2007, the game has often been associated with complex RPG mechanics, deep lore, and hardcore combat. So despite its notoriety, there's probably a good chance you've not played a Witcher game before. Well, I can tell you now, that's all about to change with Wild Hunt. So, why am I here? Well, GameSpot was given the opportunity to gain unprecedented access to a near-complete version of the game. So we booked the flights, packed up the cameras, and then spent the past couple of days playing the game and talking to the development team behind this open-world Witcher. And this week, we're going to share everything we learned with you. So, using exclusive new gameplay of this impressive open-world RPG, candid interviews from the lead producers on the project, and our own impressions after a combined 12 hours playing Wild Hunt, this week we're going to tell you everything we've learned. The scale of its world, the types of quests you'll undertake, its dynamic story, how it plays on PC, how it looks on consoles, and how Wild Hunt is set to be one of the biggest hits of 2015.
Go.
But before we travel to the vast and varied world of The Witcher 3, we must first go to an equally bizarre place. This story starts in 80s Warsaw, in a Poland shrouded in a cloud of Soviet communism. The year is 1988. Gamers in the United States are enjoying the fruits of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's the year Super Mario Bros. 2 and Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link reached North American shelves. And in Japan, the Mega Drive, or Genesis, is being launched. However, to the east of Germany, things are a lot different. The Republic of Poland had been decimated during World War II, and in the years following, Poland limped on. Swallowed up by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it was operated for decades by a communist party in distant Moscow. The Palace of Culture, a Soviet gift to the Poles, stood like a combined citadel over Warsaw's citizens. This was a state where trade was practically non-existent. Every aspect of life was run by a centralized government, and so while very real walls blocked some from the outer world, the lack of trade with the outside world created a cultural wall that covered an area the size of a continent.
Tear down the wall!
But this didn't mean that people didn't find a way to get a hold of Western media. Music, films, and even games were brought across the border from neighboring countries. They were copied, traded, replicated, and spread across cities and regions. People would go to computer exchanges and swap copies of games freely, and it wasn't even technically illegal. But it's not as if piracy was just accepted here in Poland. It was actually completely legal. There's no such thing as copyright law in communist states. So while all the kids in Europe were illegally copying their Commodore 64 games by hitting play and record on tape decks, here in Poland, radio stations were literally broadcasting them over the airwaves. So you could just sit at home, tune into your favorite radio station and record C64 games right there and then. Games were so free here in Poland that they were literally flying through the air. But when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, communism fell to its knees and capitalism flooded into Poland from across its western German border. More media than ever before sold by a brand new generation of entrepreneurs. Open-air markets became the place to buy these goods, and as trade increased, the importing scene grew and grew. And as founder Marcin Nowinski reminisces, this is where CD Projekt was born.
I met the co-founder Michał Kiciński back in high school, and our passion was to play games. So we were skipping school, playing games. So we were, on the local forums, on the international forums. And at a certain point, through this context, I realized that there is a new cool thing called CD-ROMs. Right now, I think you can make the sophisticated guess of our company name, CD Projekt. We are probably the first people in Poland to import games on CD-ROMs. Initially, we did it really not for business, but we wanted to play these games. After a while, we thought, hey, maybe there is some business we could do, so let's try. I was importing 1 or 2 units per title, and Michał was selling them on the local computer exchange. There was a crave for that, so before people were isolated, and suddenly, wow, you can get your hands on exciting stuff. the biggest change was from 94 and onwards. Initially, I think in 94, when the software started selling, a lot of people, a lot of consumers were like, hey, why the hell should I buy something original? You know, I can have it for free. We were educating people that buying games makes sense and has value. Initially, you had to really serve them this value in a very physical, like touchable form. Yeah. I still think it's important, because if you look at the boxes of our Witcher titles, there's a lot of stuff inside.
Yeah.
Especially in Eastern Europe, especially in Poland, people just didn't know why on earth they should buy software. It's free, you get it from a friend.
So why are we talking about the Polish piracy scene? Well, because the seeds of this consumer-centric culture of game sales is bearing fruits today. A culture where serving the consumer value was an important aspect of trade, and this value-centric mentality is no more apparent than when you look at how CD Projekt is going to handle DLC for Wild Hunt.
Tell me about the DLC plan for this. What's the... It's an interesting sort of tactic.
It's free.
It's just like that, it's free.
Yeah, I mean, I really think the word DLC, it's devaluated. There are some DLCs which are like good old expansions, and then I would probably prefer to call them expansions.
Yeah.
If it's a DLC, if it's hairstyle, weapon, armor, horse armor maybe, this should be for free really. And this is our way of saying thank you to the gamers for buying our game. Also, we want to encourage them, show them, hey guys, we have something in store for you. We really care when you buy our game. Consider buying it. That's it. That's always their choice, you know.
It seems like you're doing the same thing you did with the boxes before, like sticking in all this free stuff.
Of course. Because honestly speaking, what does it cost us to make a set of armors? Well, I don't know, several hours, maybe 1, 2, 3 people. Hey, considering the scale of the game and considering the investment people will be taking in the game, spending the hours, hey, let's make it more fun for them. So I think it's kind of obvious. I would like to get such stuff for free. That's why we're doing it, partly.
CD Projekt understands sales. They've published and distributed games to the Polish market in some form or another for over 20 years. But what type of game do you make when your company was founded on distributing Western media around post-socialist Poland? Well, CD Projekt decided to flip the script, buying the games rights to one of their nation's literature treasures and creating a game that they could share with people around the world.
Our dream was always to make our own game, but we had this world with all this history with 7 books, right now it's 8. We wanted to have creative freedom, so we bought out the part of the world and we had full creative freedom. I think the fact that we had this freedom created sort of a paranoia, because we thought, okay, we have these Eastern European fans who really know every single bit and piece in the game.
The first 2 games in this series were critical darlings and incredibly popular with the PC role-playing crowd because of their challenging combat system and rich fiction. But for all they did well, Witcher 1 and Assassins of Kings were both pretty terrible at introducing newcomers to their complex mechanics and rich lore. But for my time playing Wild Hunt, thankfully this is something CD Projekt have spent some time trying to fix. After a brief story segment we won't get into for fear of spoilers, you begin the game in a relatively small open world area. This miniature version of the game's main open world acts as a playground for the first few hours of the game. Here you'll take on a few story missions, explore, solve side quests, and get used to the game's mechanics. So, what of these mechanics? Well, for the uninitiated, you play as Geralt of Rivia, a legendary Witcher. Witchers are a band of highly trained monster hunters who are mutated at a young age to be experts in their field. As such, Geralt carries 2 swords, silver for killing beasts and steel for human prey. He is gifted in magic and can cast a range of spells or signs to both defend and attack. And as an alchemist, he can collect different ingredients around the world and concoct potions. You can't drink too many of these though, as each potion increases Geralt's chance of toxicity. This is a good example of an area in which Wild Hunt is bending a knee for both newcomers and its new open world gameplay. While previous games required you to prepare for combat by meditating and taking potions beforehand, in Witcher 3 you'll be able to prepare potions during meditation and consume them anytime during combat. And while previous games required you to collect specific ingredients to refill these potions, in Wild Hunt, every time you meditate, the potions you've crafted will refill themselves using whatever alcohol reserves you have. Unlike most third-person action games, combat in The Witcher 3 isn't just a series of hacks and slashes, it's far more deliberate and engaging, and it plays much like The Witcher 2. Sword strikes must be timed, monster movements must be studied, and certain combinations of potions, signs, and weapons make for the best attack. Human enemies can lose stamina just as quickly as Geralt can, and when they do, it allows you to unleash devastating blows. This makes swordplay far more engaging. Sword fighting on horseback allows you to slow down time for brutal attacks. And while this footage makes chopping up mobs look easy, we played around with the game's difficulty settings, and on anything other than easy, Wild Hunt's combat can be as punishing as games like Dark Souls. However, if you don't want to get your sword dirty, conversations are an equally important aspect of completing quests. In the prologue area, there are plenty of people to talk to, barmaids, dwarfs with side quests. Sometimes you can talk yourself out of a situation or cast a sign, but it's not always possible. Sometimes the game pushes you into a corner and you are forced to fight out of it. This is a game with a lot going on, and it feels far more polished than the previous games in the series in this respect. But it's the way in which these systems work together fluidly that makes it incredibly fun to spend time in this world. Walking into villages, chatting to the locals and picking up quests, using your Witcher skills to track down monsters and solve local mysteries, wandering into other towns, across hills, and even into buildings seamlessly without loading screens. In my first few hours of the game, I slayed some random bear, got in a sword fight in a pub, and wandered into a random cave full of nasty creatures. It's that type of game. Keep in mind though, this early prologue area is designed to instill this sort of wonder, so it's too early to tell if this variety will keep you hooked a few dozens of hours in. We'll dive into the type of quests and missions in another video. But this prologue area does achieve something that the previous games in this series never did. It gives you the tools and time to get to grips with some relatively complex systems. CD Projekt are clearly trying to reach for a larger audience with this Witcher. And you only have to look at how the logo has changed to figure that one out.
Is it intentional that this sort of, I remember looking at the branding for Witcher 3 when it first came out with the trailers, and there's a big 3, and now it looks like Wild Hunt, the 3 has become like a scratch in the middle. This is kind of like a...
It's like the crown of the Wild Hunt, like the mask, yeah. At a certain point we realized that we might be isolating a lot of gamers who will come to the store and will say, I haven't played The Witcher. The Witcher Wild Hunt, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, it's fully playable on its own. You don't need to know anything.
In many ways, this is the coming of age of The Witcher. It's the first time several of the dreams of its creators have been even possible, the first time it's been set in an open world, and the first time it's coming out on both consoles and PC simultaneously. So, is it any good? Well, tomorrow here on GameSpot, in part 2, we unveil the world of The Witcher 3, its vast open landscapes, the beasts that inhabit it, and of course, how an open world fundamentally changes this fantasy role-playing series. See you then!